All right, hello all. We're going to start the semester off by doing just a couple days of pre-work, just to make sure that back when you were in Algebra 1, you got a good dose of factoring, because factoring is one of those skills that's never, ever, ever going to go away. It'll follow you throughout math. So let's start off by just doing some basic multiplying, and then I will show you how to factor and work backwards, because that's all that factoring is. All right, so when you multiply expressions such as this first one, you use the distributive property. So I need to distribute x in there, and I have 2x times x, which is 2x squared. And then don't forget my minus sign, and then 5 times x is 5x. The second one, we're just distributing this basic 3. So I have 3x plus 21. For this third one, I'm distributing 5x inside the two numbers in the parentheses. So I have 5x squared plus 5x times 2 is 10x. Over here, we're multiplying two binomials. So hopefully you remember this term FOIL. For first, outside, inside, last. So basically, it's just the distributive property. I'm taking x times x squared, or x times x, which is x squared. And then I go to my outside, which is x times negative 2, which is negative 2x. And then the next term, or the next letter, is I, which stands for inside. So now I'm just distributing this negative 8. So I get a negative 8x. And then negative 8x times negative 2 is positive 16. So first, outside, inside, last. And then I can combine my like terms and simplify to x squared minus 10x plus 16. Okay, so a few more foiling ones. So my first term here is going to be x squared. My outside term will be plus 3x. My inside term will be plus 8x. And my last term will be plus 24. I can then put my middle terms together most of the time and end up with x squared plus 11x plus 24. Okay, so this next one, I got x times x, which is x squared. X times negative 3 is going to be a negative 3x. So there's first, outside. Inside is going to be a plus 10x. And last is going to be 10 times negative 3, which is negative 30. I'll put these two terms together. I have x squared. Negative 3x plus 10x is plus 7x minus 30. So what you're going to see here in a few minutes is when we factor, we're actually undoing the multiplication that we just performed. All right, so this one has a 5 sitting out in front. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can go ahead and FOIL your x minus 6 times x plus 2. Or you can go ahead and distribute this 5 on the inside of the first set of parentheses. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have 5x minus 30 times x plus 2. And then I'm going to perform my foiling. So 5x times x is 5x squared. Outside will be 5x times 2, which is plus 10x. Then I go on my inside. Negative 30 times x is negative 30x. And my last is negative 30 times 2, which is negative 60. And my two middle terms go together again, my like terms, and I get 5x squared minus 20x minus 60. Okay, so this last one, I have a negative 2 sitting out in front. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute my negative 2 in there. So I get negative 2x plus 18 times x minus 2. So now I can FOIL. So I got negative 2x times x, which is negative 2x squared. Negative 2x times negative 2 is plus 4x. If I go to my inside, I have 18 times x, which is plus 18x. And then 18 times negative 2, which is negative 36. My two middle terms go together again. So I get negative 2x squared plus 22x minus 36. All right, so there's a review of some distributive property and multiplying binomials. So now let's work backwards and see if you can remember some factoring. So I know that was cut a little bit short just because of distance learning last spring. All right, so when you factor, the first thing you always look for is your greatest common factor. You always look for a greatest common factor first. Always, always, always. It makes life so much simpler. Okay, so if I look at this first one, in my 5 and my 10, I can pull out a 5. So my GCF is going to be 5. And then out of x and x squared, I can pull out a 5x. So then I'm going to be left with a binomial. I'm dividing both of these by 5x. 5x squared over 5x is going to be x. And 5x goes into 10x 2 times. So if you go back to this first set of examples, that one follows number 3. So here I multiplied it, and here I factored it. So they end up to be the same thing. All right, so when you have a trinomial or a quadratic with 3 terms, when this lead term right here has a 1 in front of it, factoring is easy. So the only thing you have to know is you're going to have 2 binomials. In order to get this 1x squared, my first terms have to be x and x. That's my only choice. So then I look at my constant, which is 16, and my middle term, which is negative 10. So I need 2 numbers that multiply 16 that add to negative 10. So if you think about your factors of 16, that's going to be an 8 and a 2. And in order to get the negative, when I add them, they both have to be negative. So I end up with a minus 8 and a minus 2. So again, if you look backwards, you see number 4 here. Here's where I FOILed it. I ended up with x squared minus 10x plus 16. When I factor it, I simply go backwards, and I end up with the product of 2 binomials. Okay, so here's another quadratic. So my lead coefficient, or the number in front of x squared, is 1. So I know this has to be an x and an x. I need to multiply to positive 24 and add to 11. So those 2 numbers are going to be 8 and 3, and they're both going to be positive. So this is going to factor backwards to x plus 8 and x plus 3. If you look back at my previous examples where we multiplied, This matches up with number 5. So here I just have a binomial on number 4. So I know I'm not going to have 2 sets of parentheses like I did on number 3 and number 2. So here I'm just looking for my GCF, which is going to be 3. If I divide both of these terms by 3, I end up with x plus 7. That one, if you look back, matches up with number 2, I believe. Okay, so all of these, let's see, 5, 6, and 8 all have 3 terms, and number 7 only has 2 terms. Okay, so remember, you're always looking for a greatest common factor first. In number 5, there is no greatest common factor. They don't have anything in common. So I assume I can factor it to the product of 2 binomials. So my first terms have to be x and x because the lead coefficient is 1. So here I need to multiply to negative 30, but add to my middle term, which is 7. So if I think about my factors of 30, I'm quite certain that 3 and 10 are going to work. Okay, so I need to multiply to a negative, so I know that one of those numbers has to be negative, but they need to add to a positive 7, so my 3 has to be negative. So that factors to x minus 3 and x plus 10. So if you go back to the beginning where I multiplied, that one matches up here with number 6. So again, we started off multiplying to get my quadratic trinomial. And now I'm factoring. I'm starting with my quadratic trinomial and I'm going backwards. This is a skill that you're going to have to use throughout the quadratic unit that's coming up. And when we get to polynomials and rationals and everything else that's coming up this semester. All right, so these numbers look pretty big, and I have a number in front of x squared that's not equal to 1. So there is a method that I'll show you tomorrow to factor one like this, but that's why we always look for our greatest common factor. So here my greatest common factor is I can pull a factor of 5 out of all of these. So I can divide everything there by 5. They don't have an x in common. So if I divide through by 5, I end up with x squared minus 4x, and 5 goes into 60 12 times. So now I look to see, this is why the directions say factor completely. I look to see if I can factor that again. So do I have 2 numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 4? If you think about your multiples of 12, that's going to have to be a 6 and a 2. And I need a negative 4 in the middle, so my 6 has to be negative. So that helps me out with my 2 binomials. Don't forget to put the 5 in the front. So I'm going to have an x and an x to give me the x squared here, and then a minus 6 and a plus 2. So here's where they multiply to negative 12, and then negative 6 plus 2 adds to negative 4. All right, so if you go back and match that one up, I believe it goes back to number 7, right here. So if you remember, I distributed that 5 in there first, and then I multiplied those 2 binomials out, and I ended up with the same trinomial that I had when I factored it. Okay, so this one is just a binomial. There's only 2 terms, 2x squared and negative 10x. So here I always look for my greatest common factor first. So I can pull a 2 out of the 2 and the 10. And then for x and x squared, I can pull out my greatest common factor of 2x. If I do that correctly, I should have a binomial left. So I have 2x and 2x. So here my 2's cancel. X squared over x is equal to x. And 2x goes into 10x 5 times, and that needs to be subtraction. That one was a little bit easier factoring. Okay, so one more. So this one's a little bit tricky because I have a negative 2 sitting out front. And my rule right here is it is much easier to factor a trinomial if that lead coefficient or the number in front of x squared is positive. So I'm going to pull out a greatest common factor here of negative 2. So be careful because now you're dividing through by a negative 2. So my negative 2 comes out front. I'm left with x squared. This is going to be plus 11x. Negative divided by negative is positive. And plus 18. So then remember, always look to see if the trinomial factors again. Can I multiply to 18? Oh, my pen's not writing anymore. Multiply to 18. Add to 11. And my factors of 18 are going to be a 9 and a 2, and they would both be positive. So this one's going to factor to x plus 9 and x plus 2. All right, so today was the easier day of factoring because all you were doing was looking for a greatest common factor and your lead coefficients of your trinomials that were left were always a 1x squared. So tomorrow's going to get a little bit more complicated when I throw a number in front of that x squared, but you'll be fine. Hopefully you'll remember it from the little amount of time that you had in factoring in Algebra 1. Have a great day. You do have an assignment, a 10-problem assignment to do over this lesson as well.